Yes, well, I was born in Berlin in August 1945. No, 42, sorry. 42. And my father was 47 and my mother was 40. And so at that age, they presumably hadn't expected to have children. I didn't have any brothers and sisters as far as I know. I don't think they'd have had time. My father was picked up by the Nazis in early 1943, and I think that they couldn't get out from Berlin, from Germany. They were stuck there. Even though my father had fought in the First World War, fought for Germany, it didn't make any difference. So he was sent straight to Auschwitz. At 47, he was considered too old. And then a few months later, my mother was deported from Siemens, from the factory there. She was working as a slave labourer. And in June of 1943, they rounded my mother up with the other workers, and they rounded up myself with my mother and all the other children in the Jewish nursery where I was put while my mother was working. So we were taken to Theresienstadt. My mother died in Theresienstadt of, I don't know, the accounts vary of what she died of, but really it's neither here nor there. So I was put with 5 other orphans. I wasn't living with my mother in Theresienstadt. She was obviously put to work in the camp somewhere in the women's barracks. So we were 6 little orphans, and we were kept together because we were younger than the older children and we were older than the babies. So somehow the 6 of us gelled as a family, 3 boys and 3 girls, and we were there for 2 years with very little support from grown-ups. Women from the kitchens brought us food whenever they could. But basically we were left to fend for ourselves. So we were pretty wild. I think that, the things that are happening today, I think my message has always been, to stand up to this sort of behavior, that coercive behavior, and we see what's happening in the world today. And then you see governments caving, just appeasing, and you think, what good did the appeasers do in the 1930s? And I do despair that people are not responding. And what are we doing about it? And what can we do to combat it? And I think reminding people about what happened in the 30s, 1930s, that appeasement isn't the answer. I mean, you have to stand up, to bullying and so on. And my children and grandchildren are very good. They know, and they're excellent. They've taken that on very much so. That any discrimination and so on, they get very annoyed about and will do something about it. They're not afraid to stand up. I think it's terrifying. I mean, why wouldn't one be terrified? I mean, not just across the pond but everywhere. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a decent statesperson leading any country in the world, and it's just it's a mayhem, and it is very. I mean, I'm frightened myself, but I think, well, if anything happens to me, well, I've had my life, but I worry for my children and my grandchildren. And they're all over the world. They're working everywhere, and I think history is repeating itself.
Sorry.
While I typically conclude my remarks with a plea to let us know if you are now aware of someone whom we can help, it seems appropriate, perhaps now more than ever, to seek generous funding from the Austrian and German governments for the direct and exclusive benefit of the first generation. And we want to hear about those who can help. We are all acutely and countries when the evil of hatred, otherism, othering and anti-Semitism are allowed to take root. Today we also mark the anniversary of the Wannsee Conference, the gathering of high, as well as being an introspective service, we send our own message, and one that echoes through the generations. On every Shabbat in synagogues across this country, we say a prayer. We here know well what starts with words does not end it. We also want to hear from and about their descendants. We are increasingly investing to offer activities of interest to those service of commemoration. We just had a celebration of the 80th anniversary of the AJL German.
Positions of power feel emboldened by their actions going unquestioned and unchallenged. And so we see in the Torah how taxation can lead to oppression. The memories of these innocent victims be a sanctification of God's name. O compassionate one, we ask that you hold these souls in your sheltering embrace for all eternity, and that they be bound up in the bond of life.
Whose manifold contributions include having served as an AJR trustee and
But everybody around assumed that it was bad news. So of course we were scared. The children from Theresienstadt were put on planes to Rivenier in the Lake District. I just about remember getting on the flight to England. I was one of the that they had. I only found out many years later about the details. I wanted to know then so I could tell my children what had happened. That's their right and heritage. That's when I was eventually able to get an experimental group up with me. Because the 6 of us had stuck together in the camp without grown-ups, we weren't really being looked after. And many years later I found out that one of the boys had thought that I'd run away. And he told me. I didn't know how they'd been killed, just that they had. I only found out many years later about the details. I wanted to know then so I could tell my children what had happened. That's their right and heritage. That's when I was eventually able to get some dates and know exactly what happened to my parents and how they were deported and killed.
many years. In recognition of her dedication to sharing her experience as one of the boys, Joanna was awarded the British Empire Medal for services to Holocaust education in the 2019 New Year's Honours List. In introducing Joanna, I should add that we were delighted to welcome her daughter, Mandy, and grandson, Stephen. Joanna has produced a